Welcome to the Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on real-time hot topics in the gender equality and diversity spaces. In this episode, I will break down a current event, provide my point of view, what I liked and would like to see change, and leave you with some actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. I share this information because equality is a candid conversation. It takes bravery and courage, and you do not have to do it alone. At Pivot Point, I believe we are stronger together. We are one. Let's dig into this week's episode. So this week, some interesting data came out from the folks at Lean In. If you're not familiar with the organization, they publish regular reports. It is based on Sheryl Sandberg's work earlier when she published the book, Lean In. Now that's been several years and the conversation has changed much, but it's a fascinating organization that, again, provides resources, support, videos, lean in circles for women to get together and talk about challenges. So the report this week that I will hyperlink to in the show notes is really unsettling. And so one of my allies shared this when it first came out last weekend. And at first when I looked at it, I thought, no, this can't be true. It just can't be true. And I'll go ahead and read it again, link to the study. But essentially, the key data point they found in their survey that they did in today's workplace with men and women and today's leaders inside many organizations, when they surveyed men and asked them about participating in a common work activity with a woman, such as mentoring, working alone, or socializing together, 60% of managers who are men are uncomfortable in common work activities with women. And this is actually a 32% jump up from the data last year. It was about 50% last year. So I'm so frustrated, number one, by this, and two, super curious. So this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to meet men where they're at, because when you kind of dig more into the data, they asked specifically senior level men about their hesitancy to spend time with junior women than junior men across, again, a wide array of basic work activities. So things you have to do to get your job done. So this is a problem. And what the senior level men said, they are 12 times more likely to hesitate to have one-on-one meetings with women versus men. 12 times. 9 times more likely to hesitate to travel together for work, and 6 times more likely to hesitate to have work dinners. And as for why this is happening, they say 36% of men say they avoided mentoring or socializing with a woman because they were nervous about how it would look. This comes at the same time. Obviously, Me Too has been a catalyst for this and thus the survey. So when they first did the data, again, 50% of men were saying this. And that was April of last year, so about 6 months after Lean. And now we're over a year and a half post Me Too hashtag. And what's interesting is sexual harassment. There's a perception of we clean this bad behavior up. You know, Matt Lauer and Harvey Weinstein are no longer public figures. We're done. Certainly that is not the case. So sexual harassment, as they say in their words, remains pervasive in the workplace. And there's really dramatic views between men and women in how we perceive the problem of sexual harassment. So 57% of women report they've experienced some form of sexual harassment in the workplace. That could be sexist jokes, being touched in an inappropriate way, and 24% say it is on the rise. So it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. By contrast, 27% of men say that harassment is decreasing. So women are saying it's going up, men are saying it's going down, and 50% of men say that the consequences are more damaging to the careers of harassers, not victims. So women tend to disagree. 64% say it's the victims who end up paying a heavier price. So who's the victim here? And thus, the fear. So I think at the root of this is fear. Fear is a primal emotion. Fear is real. I understand, having spent my time in the trenches in corporate America. In my speaking, it is without a doubt, whether it's in a breakout or a man is bold enough to say this out loud, he will say it's just not right for men and women to be alone together at work. I make a practice to keep the door open when I'm meeting one-on-one with a woman. I make a practice to be super transparent about why we were meeting in a public place. We certainly would never meet, for a drink or something that could be misinterpreted as something else is going on there. So a couple thoughts on this. First of all, why do we assume when a man and a woman are alone together that it must be something sexual? I just don't understand that. When I meet alone with women, no one thinks that. When men and men meet alone, no one's thinking that. Why is it that can be the only relationship between us? It has to be sexual. I would absolutely challenge that line of thinking and that bias that it must be this and not this. So please call that out. And I think one of the best tools that I'll also hyperlink to in the show notes is the flip it to test it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, I've referenced it in the podcast before. It's a great tool that Kristen Pressner had a TED Talk about to explain, challenge. This is a great way to safely challenge norms. So if you're a woman, for example, and your male boss, counterpart, whatever, says, I don't want to meet one-on-one, let's keep the door open this time. Let's go out and talk in a public place. Challenge it and say, hey, we need to talk about difficult issues. Some of that requires privacy. Some of that requires us to really be candid, and the door might need to be shut, or we might need to meet in a private place so that we can truly be candid with one another, not filter what we're saying because other people could hear it. And I think just leaning into that and saying, if I were a man, would he say the same thing? So that's the flip it to test it. And I love this. I actually used this in a session I had with a leadership team. The male CEO turned to me and said, hey, it's just not appropriate for men and women to be alone together anymore. And he thought he was doing us a favor, right? I think he thought this is what's going to prevent sexual harassment. Let's just not meet alone together. Therefore, it does not happen. Good intentions, bad behavior. And so I challenged this leader and I said, hey, I want to challenge you on that and ask you, if it was a man meeting alone with a man, would that be okay? A woman meeting alone with a woman, would that be okay? And light bulb moment, he kind of sits back in his chair. This 7-second rule, for those of you who know me well, I'm a fan of the 7-second rule. Pause and wait for it. And surely he came to his own conclusion. He said, you're right. I wouldn't challenge that. Maybe I shouldn't be challenging men and women meeting alone together. And I said, I think he had good intentions there. I acknowledge that. I said, here's the problem. If men and women cannot meet alone together, they cannot be mentors, they cannot be advocates, they can't really get to know you like a private conversation would lead to. Women don't have access to decisions that are being made, to relationships that are being formed, to their allies, essentially. So you are limiting a woman's progress because she doesn't have the same access to decision makers that her male counterparts do. That is problematic. So think about it that way. We need to have private conversations